Daniel Ross pressed his palm against the cold window of the shuttle. Below him stretched Talvis Station, a maze of docking rings and habitat modules floating in the darkness. Somewhere down there, trade delegates from 40 different species were arguing about shipping routes and tariff rates. Daniel was supposed to join them. That was his job as Earth's trade envoy. The shuttle docked with a soft thump. Daniel gathered his papers and headed into the station. The air smelled like recycled atmosphere mixed with too many different alien species living in close quarters. He had been here twice before. Nothing ever changed on Talvis. Except today, everything was different. Daniel noticed them immediately when he entered the main concourse. Hundreds of beings huddled in temporary shelters along the outer ring. They wore tattered clothes. Their eyes held the kind of emptiness Daniel recognized from his old job. Before he became a diplomat, he had investigated war crimes on Earth. He knew what trauma looked like. A small creature bumped into his leg. She looked up at him with golden eyes set in a face covered with pale fur. Her ears were pressed flat against her head. She could not have been more than 7 or 8 years old in human terms. "Sorry, sir," she whispered and scurried away. Daniel changed direction. He followed the child into the refugee section. Nobody stopped him. The station security seemed to be pretending this area did not exist. An older woman of the same species was preparing food over a portable heater. Daniel approached carefully. "Excuse me, I'm Daniel Ross from Earth. Can I ask what happened to all these people?" The woman looked at him for a long moment. "You really don't know?" "No, ma'am, I just arrived today." She gestured for him to sit. "We are Felinar. Our world was called Pelion 7, was past tense." Her voice cracked. "The Dren Empire came 6 months ago. They said we were occupying their expansion zone. They gave us 3 days to evacuate." Daniel pulled out his tablet. "Did you have a legal claim to the world?" "We had lived there for 200 years. We had filed all the proper documents with the Galactic Council. It was our home." She stirred the pot in front of her. 3 days is not enough time to evacuate a planet. We tried. We really tried. But we had 12 million people. The Dren only allowed 30 transport ships to land. Daniel's hand tightened on his tablet. "What happened to the others?" "They executed them." The woman's voice went flat. "Shot them in groups of 100, made the survivors watch. Then they shot them too. Only a few thousand of us escaped." Daniel felt his blood go cold. 12 million people. On Pelion 7 alone. But we have met refugees from other worlds here. The Dren have been doing this for years. Dozens of colonies, always the same pattern. Give impossible evacuation orders. Execute whoever remains. Claim the empty world. A younger Felinar male approached. "She speaks truth, human. I watched them kill my entire family." The Dren soldiers were laughing. They made bets on how many they could shoot before reloading. Daniel stood up. His hands were shaking. "Has anyone reported this to the Council?" The woman laughed bitterly. "The Council, the mighty Galactic Council that maintains peace and order. They told us it was a territorial dispute, said we should have evacuated faster. The Dren are powerful. They have the 3rd largest fleet in known space. Nobody wants to anger them." Daniel spent the next 4 hours moving through the refugee camp. He recorded testimony after testimony. The stories were all variations of the same nightmare. The Dren would arrive. They would give absurd deadlines. They would execute anyone who remained. Then they would move colonists onto the empty worlds. One survivor showed him scars from energy weapons. Another had pictures of mass graves taken from orbit before fleeing. A third had an audio recording of Dren commanders discussing execution quotas. By the time Daniel returned to the diplomatic quarter, his tablet was full of evidence. He immediately requested a meeting with the Council Liaison Office. The liaison was a tall reptilian species named Thex. He listened to Daniel's report with obvious discomfort. These are serious allegations, Envoy Ross. They are not allegations, I have evidence, testimony from hundreds of survivors, recordings, documents. The Dren Empire is committing genocide. Thex tapped his claws on the desk. You must understand the political reality. The Dren are a council member in good standing. They contribute significant resources to peacekeeping operations. Accusing them of such crimes would destabilize the entire region. Daniel leaned forward. How many people have to die before stability stops being an excuse? That is not fair. We have protocols, proper channels. You cannot simply march in and demand immediate action. Then what do you suggest? I should go back to those refugees and tell them their dead families do not matter because of protocols. Thex looked away. I suggest you focus on your actual job, Envoy Ross, trade negotiations. Leave these matters to those with more experience in galactic politics. Daniel left the office. He contacted his superior back on Earth and explained the situation. The response came 6 hours later. Earth's government was interested but cautious. They wanted more evidence before taking an official position. They reminded Daniel not to create an incident that might harm Earth's standing in the council. Daniel ignored the advice. He spent the next 3 days documenting everything. He hired a local shuttle and flew to the nearest abandoned colony world. The Dren had not bothered to hide their crimes. Mass graves were clearly visible from orbit. Execution chambers stood empty but functional. Kill orders were still stored in the colonial administration computers. When Daniel returned to Talvis, he uploaded everything to his tablet. Then he made copies, lots of copies. He sent one set to Earth, another set to every major news organization he could find, a third set to each of the 47 council member species. His supervisor called within an hour. What have you done? My job, Daniel said. Someone has to. The galaxy was about to have a very uncomfortable conversation. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened 2 weeks after Daniel released the evidence. In that time, the galaxy had erupted into debate. Some species called for immediate sanctions against the Dren Empire. Others urged caution. A few pretended nothing had happened at all. Daniel sat in the observer section wearing his formal diplomatic uniform. He had been officially reprimanded by Earth's government for his unauthorized actions. They were still deciding whether to recall him, but they had also sent additional investigators to verify his findings. Everything Daniel claimed was true. The council chamber was a massive circular room with seats arranged in ascending tiers. Each of the 47 member species had a designated section. At the center stood the speaking platform where representatives could address the full assembly. High Arbiter Kesslin of the Dren Empire approached the platform. He was tall and broad-shouldered with dark scales covering his body. His voice carried across the chamber without need for amplification. This council has gathered based on accusations made by a junior human diplomat, accusations that insult the honor of the Dren Empire. Kesslin's eyes found Daniel in the crowd. Let me be clear. The Dren have violated no council laws. The worlds in question were within our legally designated expansion zone. The previous occupants were squatters who refused lawful evacuation orders. Murmurs spread through the chamber. Daniel kept his face neutral. Kesslin continued. Some casualties occurred during the enforcement of our territorial rights. This is regrettable, but the numbers have been wildly exaggerated by those seeking to damage Dren reputation. Perhaps a few thousand died across all the colonies, not the absurd figures being claimed. A representative from the insectoid Vris species rose. High Arbiter, we have reviewed the evidence provided by Envoy Ross. The documentation seems quite thorough. Documentation can be fabricated, Kesslin replied smoothly. The human shows us blurry images and second-hand testimony. Where are the bodies? Where is the physical proof? Daniel could not stay silent anymore. He He stood up. Permission to address the council. Prime Counselor Thex, who presided over the session, hesitated. Several representatives objected loudly. Others called for Daniel to speak. Finally, Thex gestured toward the platform. The council recognizes Envoy Ross of Earth. You may approach. Daniel walked down to the central platform. His legs felt steady despite his racing heart. He had prosecuted war criminals before. This was just a bigger courtroom. High Arbiter Kesslin asks where the bodies are. I can answer that. Daniel activated his tablet. Holographic images filled the chamber, aerial footage of mass graves, hundreds of them. These images were taken by independent observers over the past week. The Dren left their victims where they fell. Gasps echoed through the chamber. Even species that had remained neutral looked disturbed. Daniel switched to another file. The High Arbiter claims only a few thousand died. Here is a manifest from Pelion 7 showing 12.4 million registered residents. Here is the refugee count. Exactly 4,127 survivors. Where are the other 12 million? Kesslin's scales darkened with anger. These documents prove nothing. Population records can be inflated. Then explain these. Daniel played an audio recording. Dren voices spoke clearly. They were discussing execution schedules, debating the most efficient way to process large groups, laughing about frightened victims. The recording played for 2 minutes. The chamber fell completely silent. When it ended, Daniel spoke quietly. I have 70 hours of similar recordings, all authenticated by multiple forensic experts. The Dren commanders recorded everything. They were proud of their work. Kesslin's hands clenched into fists. This is a manipulation. Someone is trying to frame the Dren. I have video evidence as well, Daniel said, but I will not play it in this chamber. The footage is too disturbing. Executions of children, elderly, entire families. Any council member who wishes to view it may request access from me personally. Several representatives stood and walked toward Daniel. Others turned away. A few began arguing loudly with their neighbors. Prime Counselor Thex struck his gavel. Order, we will have order. He looked at Daniel with an expression that might have been respect or might have been fear. Envoy Ross, these are grave accusations. If proven true, they represent the most serious crimes imaginable. They are proven true, Daniel said firmly. I have physical evidence, digital records, survivor testimony, forensic analysis, everything you could possibly need to establish guilt beyond any doubt. The Council must consider carefully, Thex said. The Dren Empire is powerful. Any action we take could have significant consequences. Daniel felt something snap inside him. 47,000 people are dead. How much more significant can consequences get? You do not understand galactic politics, human, said a delegate from the Corthan species. The Dren fleet protects 17 trade routes. They maintain stability in 3 sectors. Sanctioning them could destabilize the entire region. Then the stability is built on bodies, Daniel said, and it deserves to be destroyed. Kesslin spoke from his seat. The human is naive. He thinks justice is simple, but we live in a complex galaxy. Sometimes difficult choices must be made for the greater good. Genocide is never for the greater good. Daniel's voice carried to every corner of the chamber. That is not complex. That is not politics. That is basic morality. Prime Counselor Thex looked uncomfortable. This council will take the evidence under advisement. We will schedule a full hearing within 60 days. Until then, all parties should refrain from inflammatory statements. 60 days. Daniel could not believe what he was hearing. People are still hiding in refugee camps. The Dren are still occupying stolen worlds. And you want to wait 2 months. The council has procedures, Thex said. They exist for good reasons. Daniel looked around the chamber. Most of the delegates were already gathering their things to leave. They wanted this problem to go away. They wanted to return to comfortable ignorance. "I brought you evidence of mass murder," Daniel said quietly, "and you are going to do nothing." Nobody answered him. The session ended. Daniel stood alone on the platform as the chamber emptied around him. 3 weeks passed. The Galactic Council scheduled meetings about scheduling meetings. They formed committees to discuss forming committees. Meanwhile, the refugees remained in camps. The Dren continued occupying the conquered worlds. Nothing changed except the news cycle moved on to other topics. Daniel received a message on his personal terminal. It was from Myra, the young Felinar girl he had met on his first day at Talvis. Her guardian had written it for her, but the words were clearly hers. "Dear Daniel, thank you for trying. We know you did your best. Maybe justice is not for people like us. Maybe the powerful always win, but at least someone cared enough to try. That means something." Daniel read the message 3 times. Then he made a decision. He contacted Earth Military Command directly. It took 2 days of arguing with increasingly senior officers before he finally reached someone willing to listen. Admiral Karen Mitchell commanded the Third Fleet. She had fought in the Centauri conflicts and had no patience for politics. "Explain to me why I should care about alien refugees," Mitchell said over the video call. Her gray hair was pulled back tight. Her uniform was perfectly pressed. "Because it is the right thing to do," Daniel said. "That is not how military decisions work, Envoy Ross." "Then let me give you a strategic reason. The Galactic Council is watching to see how Earth responds to genocide. If we do nothing, we signal that we are just another species willing to overlook atrocities when it is convenient. But if we act, we establish Earth as a moral authority. We show that humans have principles that matter more than political calculations." Mitchell was quiet for a moment. "What exactly are you asking me to do?" "I want you to bring your fleet to Dren space, not to attack, just to make a point. Show them that someone is paying attention. That could start a war. The Dren will not attack us. They are bullies. Bullies back down when someone stands up to them. You are betting a lot of lives on that theory." Daniel met her eyes through the screen. "The Dren have already taken 47,000 lives. They will take more if nobody stops them. At some point, we have to decide what kind of species we want to be." Mitchell ended the call without answering. Daniel thought he had failed again. Then, 5 days later, Earth's Third Fleet departed from lunar orbit. Destination: Dren territory. The galaxy noticed immediately. Every major news network tracked the fleet's progress. Speculation ran wild. Was Earth declaring war? Were humans insane? What could they possibly hope to accomplish against the Dren Empire? The Galactic Council convened another emergency session. Daniel was not invited this time, but someone leaked him a live feed. High Arbiter Kesslin was speaking. "The human fleet approaches our borders. This is an act of aggression. The Dren Empire demands that Earth recall their ships immediately or face the consequences." Prime Counselor Thex looked tired. "Does Earth have a response?" A new human representative appeared. Ambassador Helen Park had arrived from Earth 2 days earlier. She was older than Daniel with white hair and dark eyes that missed nothing. "Earth has no hostile intentions toward the Dren Empire. Our fleet is conducting training exercises in international space." "Training exercises on our border," Kesslin's voice dripped with contempt. "Do you think we are fools?" "We think you are war criminals," Park said calmly, "and we think the Council lacks the courage to say so. Therefore, Earth will say it. The Dren Empire is guilty of genocide. We have presented overwhelming evidence. The Council has done nothing, so Earth will act alone." The chamber erupted. Dozens of delegates shouted at once. Kesslin stood so violently his chair fell backward. "You dare threaten us, your pathetic fleet against the might of the Dren Empire." "We do not threaten," Park replied. "We promise justice will be served, with or without Council approval." Daniel watched from his quarters. He felt a strange mixture of pride and terror. Earth was doing the right thing, but they were picking a fight they could not win. The Dren fleet outnumbered them 10-1. His terminal chimed. It was a message from Admiral Mitchell. "You better be right about this, Ross." The Third Fleet entered Dren territory the next day. They did not attack any targets. They did not threaten any ships. Instead, they began broadcasting. Every Dren communication channel suddenly carried the same content: video evidence of the massacres, audio recordings of Dren commanders laughing about executions, documents showing the genocide was planned and deliberate, all of it presented in clear, simple terms that anyone could understand. The Dren military tried to jam the broadcasts, but human technology had advanced significantly in recent years. The messages kept going through. Something unexpected happened. The Dren civilian population started watching the evidence. Most of them had no idea what their military had done. The government controlled information strictly, but now they could see the truth. Protests began on the Dren homeworld. Small at first, just a few hundred people in the capital demanding answers, then thousands, then hundreds of thousands. Within a week, every major city on the Dren homeworld had crowds in the streets. The Dren military prepared to crush the protests. General Draxus ordered troops to open fire on demonstrators, but the soldiers refused. They had watched the broadcasts too. They knew what their commanders had ordered on the colony worlds. Many of them were horrified. Meanwhile, other species were paying attention. The small nations that had been silent before started speaking up. The Felinar survivors who had testified to Daniel became symbols. News networks across 40 systems ran stories about the massacres. Ships from the Keshan Concordat appeared at the edge of Dren space. Then the Vriss sent observers. Within 2 weeks, vessels from 17 different species had joined the human fleet. They did not come to fight. They came to bear witness. The Dren Empire found itself surrounded by an impromptu coalition. High Arbiter Kesslin demanded the Council order everyone to leave, but Prime Counselor Thex had lost control of the situation. He could barely get the delegates to stop arguing long enough to vote on anything. General Draxus ordered the Dren fleet to attack the human ships. He believed one decisive strike would end this embarrassment. His officers refused the order. Some of them arrested him instead. The Dren government was collapsing from within. The evidence was too clear. The crimes were too horrible, and the people were too angry to be silenced anymore. The Dren civilian government sent a message 3 days after General Draxus was arrested. They wanted to negotiate. High Arbiter Kesslin had fled the homeworld. Nobody knew where he went. The new leadership claimed they had been unaware of the military's actions. They promised reforms. Daniel did not believe them. Neither did Admiral Mitchell. "Reforms are not justice," Mitchell said during a secure call with Daniel and Ambassador Park. "These politicians enabled the massacres. They looked the other way while their military murdered millions." "What do you suggest?" Park asked. "We demand they surrender the war criminals for trial. Every officer involved. Every politician who knew and did nothing. Every administrator who processed the kill orders." Daniel nodded. "The Galactic Council has a war crimes tribunal. It has never been used because nobody has ever been willing to enforce it. Maybe it is time to change that." Park looked skeptical. "The Council barely functions on a good day. You want them to prosecute one of their most powerful members." "I want justice," Daniel said. "Everything else is negotiable." The human fleet remained in Dren space while diplomats argued. More ships arrived every day. Not military vessels. Civilian transports carrying journalists and legal observers and representatives from smaller species who had never before had a voice in galactic affairs. Daniel returned to Talva Station. The refugee camps were still there. Myra found him as soon as he arrived. She ran up and hugged his leg. Is it true, she asked. Are the Dren really going to face punishment? I hope so, Daniel said. He did not want to make promises he could not keep. But it is complicated. Why is justice always complicated? Myra's golden eyes looked up at him. They killed my family. That should be simple. An older Felinar named Ren approached. He had lost both legs in the Pelion 7 massacre. The girl speaks truth. Your species has done more in 1 month than the Council did in 50 years. Why? Daniel knelt down so he was eye level with them both. Because humans remember our own history. We know what happens when good people do nothing. We decided a long time ago that we would never be the people who did nothing. Even when it costs you, Ren asked. Especially then. Daniel met with survivors every day. He documented their stories in more detail. Legal experts from Earth arrived to help build formal cases against specific Dren officers. The evidence kept growing. Meanwhile, the Galactic Council was being forced to act. Public pressure from dozens of species made inaction impossible. Prime Counselor Thex finally scheduled a formal war crimes hearing. The new Dren government had no choice but to cooperate or face complete isolation. 237 Dren officers and officials were identified as primary suspects. Most of them had already been arrested by their own government. The others were being hunted. High Arbiter Kesslin remained missing. Daniel was asked to serve as a special prosecutor. Earth's government approved the assignment. They had finally accepted that this was bigger than politics. This was about defining what the galaxy would tolerate. The trial was scheduled to take place on Unity Prime, the Council homeworld. A special tribunal was assembled with judges from 9 different species. None of them were Dren. None of them were human either. The Council wanted this to be seen as impartial. Daniel arrived at Unity Prime 6 weeks after the fleet first entered Dren space. The planet was beautiful from orbit. Blue oceans and green continents. Cities that glittered in the sunlight. It looked peaceful, nothing like the scarred colony worlds Daniel had visited. The tribunal chambers were deep inside the council complex. Security was intense. Protesters lined the streets outside. Some supported the trials. Others claimed it was all human propaganda. A few carried signs demanding the Dren be forgiven in the name of galactic unity. Daniel ignored them all. He had a job to do. The first day of the trial focused on Pelion 7. Daniel presented evidence methodically. Satellite images showing the colony before the Dren arrived. A thriving settlement with schools and hospitals and homes. Then images after. Empty buildings. Mass graves. Nothing living except the plants that had already started reclaiming the structures. He played testimony from survivors. Myra's guardian described watching soldiers shoot her husband. Ren explained how he lost his legs trying to protect children who were killed anyway. An elderly Felinar named Sella talked about her grandchildren being executed in front of her. The defendants sat in a secure section. Some looked remorseful, others appeared defiant. A few seemed bored. Daniel made note of their reactions. On the third day, Daniel played the recordings again, but this time with video. He had warned everyone the footage was disturbing. Still, several people in the gallery left the room. 2 judges asked for a recess. One was crying. The executions were systematic, efficient. The Dren soldiers worked in teams. They would line up groups of 100 victims, shoot them all, move to the next group. Some of the victims were very young. Others were very old. It did not matter to the soldiers. One recording showed a Dren commander addressing his troops. Remember why we do this. These inferior species occupy resources that belong to the Dren. By removing them, we create a better galaxy. Your actions today will be celebrated by future generations. The commander in that video was sitting in the defendant section. Daniel pointed at him. Do you remember saying those words? The commander met his gaze. I was following orders. Whose orders? General Draxus, High Arbiter Kesslin, the Colonial Expansion Bureau, everyone knew what was happening. Did anyone object? The commander shrugged. A few officers requested transfers. They were granted. Nobody tried to stop us. Why not? Because it was policy, official Dren Empire policy. We were told the council would not interfere. We were told we would never face consequences. Daniel nodded slowly. You were told wrong. The trial continued for 3 months. Witness after witness testified. Expert after expert analyzed evidence. Defense attorneys tried their best to create doubt, but the evidence was too overwhelming. Too many recordings, too many documents, too many bodies. The judges deliberated for 2 weeks. When they returned, the verdict was unanimous on all counts. Guilty. 237 defendants were convicted of genocide and crimes against sentient beings. The sentencing took another week. Most received life imprisonment. A few got shorter terms for cooperating. The highest-ranking officers were sentenced to serve their time on a prison world specifically designated for war criminals. High Arbiter Kesslin was convicted in absentia. A galaxy-wide warrant was issued for his arrest. The conviction sent shockwaves through the galaxy. For the first time in Council history, a major power had been held accountable for war crimes. Smaller species began speaking up about their own grievances. Old injustices that had been ignored for decades suddenly received attention. The Dren homeworld transformed almost overnight. The new government purged the military leadership. They opened their records to independent investigators. They invited survivors to tour the execution sites and document everything. It was a complete reversal of their previous position. Daniel knew it was mostly self-preservation. The Dren wanted to avoid further punishment, but he also saw genuine horror on some Dren faces when they learned what had been done in their name. Not everyone had known. Not everyone had approved. Myra and the other Felinar survivors were offered compensation. The Dren government set aside territory on 3 worlds for refugee resettlement. They provided construction materials and supplies. It was not enough to replace what was lost. Nothing could do that, but it was a start. Daniel visited one of the new settlements 6 months after the trial ended. Myra was there with hundreds of other Felinar. They were building homes and schools, planting crops, starting over. "Will you stay?" Myra asked him. "Will you help us build?" "I cannot," Daniel said gently. "Earth needs me elsewhere, but I will visit when I can." Myra nodded. She was older now. The hollow look in her eyes had not completely faded, but it was less intense than before. "Thank you for not forgetting us." "I could never forget," Daniel said. The Galactic Council passed sweeping reforms in the aftermath of the trials. They established a permanent war crimes court with actual enforcement mechanisms. They created protections for colonists and refugees. They even set up an early warning system to detect potential genocides before they escalated. Daniel was offered a position as the court's first chief prosecutor. He accepted. Ambassador Park became Earth's permanent representative to the council. Admiral Mitchell received a commendation and returned to her fleet. But the work was not finished. High Arbiter Kesslin remained at large. Intelligence reports placed him in dozens of different systems. Each sighting led nowhere. He had resources and connections. He knew how to stay hidden. Then, almost a year after the trial, Daniel received an anonymous message. It contained coordinates and a single sentence. "He is here. Come alone if you want justice." Daniel knew it was probably a trap. He told Admiral Mitchell anyway. She insisted on sending a security team with him. They traveled to the coordinates in an unmarked transport. The location was a mining station in an asteroid field, officially abandoned, but scans showed active power signatures. Someone was living there. The security team entered first. They found Kesslin in what had been the station manager's office. He was alone, unarmed. He looked thinner than Daniel remembered. His scales had lost their luster. "I wondered when someone would find me," Kesslin said. "He did not try to run or fight. I assume you are here to arrest me." "That is the plan," Daniel said. Kesslin laughed bitterly. "Do you feel proud, human? You destroyed an empire, you humiliated my people, you turned the galaxy against us." "I exposed the truth. You destroyed your own empire." "The truth," Kesslin spat the word. "The truth is that the galaxy runs on power. The strong take what they want. The weak suffer. That has always been the way." "Not anymore," Daniel said. "Because of you. One self-righteous human who decided to play hero." Kesslin shook his head. "You think this changes anything. You think other species will not continue to exploit the weak. You have just forced them to be more careful about it." Daniel moved closer. "Maybe you are right. Maybe nothing fundamental will change. But 47,000 people who died deserve more than cynicism. They deserve someone to stand up and say what happened to them was wrong. That is what humans did. That is what I did. And I would do it again." Kesslin was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was quieter. "I received my orders from the Colonial Bureau. I passed them to the military. I never visited the colonies myself. I never saw what was done." "Does that make you less guilty?" "No, I suppose it does not." Kesslin stood slowly. "I am ready to face trial now. I have had enough of hiding." They transported him back to Unity Prime. The second trial was shorter than the first. Kesslin pleaded guilty to all charges. He provided testimony that implicated others who had escaped the initial investigation. 20 more Dren officials were arrested based on his information. Kesslin was sentenced to life imprisonment. Unlike the military officers, he showed genuine remorse during sentencing. The judges acknowledged this but noted it did not reduce his responsibility. "You knew what was happening," the head judge said. "You had the power to stop it. You chose not to. That choice cost 47,000 lives." Kesslin bowed his head. "I know." After the sentencing, Daniel visited the prison world where Kesslin and the others were being held. It was not a cruel place. The inmates had decent living conditions and access to education, but they would never leave. Kesslin agreed to meet with him. They sat across from each other in a sparse visiting room. "Why did you come?" Kesslin asked. "I wanted to see if you meant it, the remorse." "Would it matter if I did?" "Yes," Daniel said. "Not for legal purposes, but for human purposes. Humans believe in redemption. We believe people can change. Even war criminals. Even them, though change does not erase what was done." Kesslin studied Daniel's face. "Your species is strange. You are capable of such compassion, but also such ruthlessness. You risked war to prosecute us. You refused every compromise, yet now you visit me to talk about redemption." "Compassion and justice are not opposites," Daniel said. "Humans learned that the hard way. We hope the rest of the galaxy can learn it more easily." Daniel left the prison and returned to Unity Prime. His work as chief prosecutor kept him busy. Cases came from across the galaxy. Some were old grievances finally being addressed. Others were new situations that might escalate without intervention. Earth's reputation had changed. Other species now saw humans as principled and willing to act on those principles. Some admired this. Others found it frustrating. A few considered it dangerous. Daniel did not care about reputation. He cared about making sure what happened on Pelion 7 never happened again. That required constant vigilance. It required speaking up when others stayed silent. It required believing justice mattered even when it was difficult. The Felinar settlements continued to grow. Other refugee groups reached out to Daniel for help. He did what he could. Sometimes it was enough. Sometimes it was not. But he never stopped trying. 5 years had passed since Daniel first walked into that refugee camp on Talva Station. The galaxy looked different now. The War Crimes Court processed dozens of cases each year. The council had actual enforcement mechanisms. Species that had been silent for centuries were finally speaking up about injustices. But Daniel was tired. He had prosecuted 43 cases in 5 years. He had visited mass graves on 17 different worlds. He had listened to thousands of testimonies from survivors who described horrors no being should have to experience. The work took a toll. Ambassador Park noticed. She called him to her office one afternoon. "You look like you need a break." "There is too much work," Daniel said. "There will always be too much work. That is the nature of justice. You cannot fix everything yourself." Daniel knew she was right, but knowing something intellectually was different from accepting it emotionally. Every case he turned down felt like a betrayal. Every delay felt like allowing suffering to continue. "The Felinar settlement on New Pelion is having a dedication ceremony next month," Park said. "They are unveiling a memorial for those who died. They specifically requested that you attend." Daniel had not been back to the Felinar settlements in over a year. Work had kept him busy. "I should go." "You should," Park agreed. "Sometimes we need to remember why we do this work." New Pelion was nothing like the original Pelion 7. That world was still scarred and empty. The Dren had returned it to the Felinar, but nobody wanted to live there anymore. Too many ghosts. Instead, the Felinar had built their new home on a world that had never known war. The settlement was small but growing. Simple buildings surrounded by agricultural fields. A school stood at the center of town. Children played in a park. It looked peaceful. Myra met Daniel at the landing pad. She was a teenager now, taller, more confident, but she still had those same golden eyes that had looked up at him 5 years ago. "Daniel," she hugged him tight, "I was afraid you would not come. I promised I would visit when I could. You have been very busy. We watch the news. We see all the work you do." They walked together through the settlement. Myra pointed out the new hospital and the community center. She showed him the memorial garden where families had planted trees for their lost loved ones. "My tree is over there," Myra said quietly. She led him to a young sapling with a plaque at its base. The plaque listed names, so many names, her parents, her siblings, her grandparents, her cousins, all gone. Daniel placed his hand on the tree trunk. "They would be proud of you." "I hope so." Myra wiped her eyes. "Sometimes I barely remember their faces anymore. That scares me." "Memory fades, but what you build in their honor lasts forever. Look around. This settlement exists because you survived, because you told your story, because you refused to let them be forgotten." The dedication ceremony took place that evening. Thousands of Felinar gathered in the central square. Representatives from dozens of species attended. Even some Dren came, members of the new generation who wanted to acknowledge what their ancestors had done. The memorial was a simple stone wall with names carved into it. 47,000 names, every being who died across all the colonies. The wall curved in a semicircle. At its center, a flame burned continuously. Ren gave the dedication speech. He stood on his prosthetic legs and spoke clearly. "We gather here not to celebrate death, but to honor life. Every name on this wall represents a person who laughed and loved and dreamed. They are gone, but we remain, and we carry their memory forward." After the ceremony, Daniel stood alone at the memorial. He read the names, not all of them. That would take days, but he read some. He wanted to know who they had been. A Dren approached him. She was young with bright green scales. "Envoy Ross, my name is Vera. I wanted to thank you." "For what?" "For holding my people accountable. I was a child when the massacres happened. My parents told me it was all lies, propaganda. But then the evidence came out. The trials happened. We had to face what we had done." "That must have been difficult." "It was. Many Dren still deny it. They claim the trials were unfair. that humans manipulated everything. But I have seen the evidence, I know what happened, and I know it was wrong. What will you do with that knowledge? Vera looked at the memorial wall. I am studying to become a council diplomat. I want to help rebuild the relationships my ancestors destroyed. It is the least I can do. Daniel nodded. The galaxy needs more people like you. The galaxy needs more people like you, Vera replied. You could have ignored us. You could have let politics determine your choices, but you demanded justice even when it was unpopular, even when it was dangerous. That is real courage. They stood together in silence for a while. Then Vera excused herself. She had other people to meet. Daniel remained at the memorial. Ambassador Park found him there an hour later. Beautiful ceremony. It was. Are you ready to come back to Unity Prime? Daniel considered the question. I think I need to take that break you mentioned. Maybe a few months. I need to remember who I am outside of this work. Park smiled. That is probably wise. The court will survive without you for a while. Will it though? There are 3 major cases pending. The Corthan situation is escalating. The Vriss have filed new complaints about. Park held up a hand. Stop. We have other prosecutors now, good ones. You trained most of them yourself. They can handle things. You need to rest. Daniel knew she was right. He looked one more time at the memorial wall, at the names, at the flame burning at its center. This was why he did the work, not for recognition, not for political advantage, but for the 47,000 beings who deserve to be remembered. Myra appeared beside him. Will you stay for dinner? We are having a feast. The whole settlement will be there. I would like that very much. They walked together back toward the community center. Behind them, the eternal flame continued to burn, a reminder that justice once kindled could never be fully extinguished. It required constant attention, constant fuel, constant commitment. But it was worth it, every time, every case, every fight. Because in the end, the measure of a civilization was not its technology or its military might. It was how it treated those who could not defend themselves. It was whether the strong protected the weak or exploited them. It was whether justice applied equally to everyone or only to those without power. Humans had answered those questions, and in doing so, they had changed the galaxy forever.